Welcome to Pre-Shift, tidbits of wisdom for everyday service. My name is TJ Griffin and I'm the corporate wine educator for Winebow. We encourage your questions at any point during this webinar, but please use the Q&A rather than the chat bar. Let me introduce your host. Master sommelier Ron Edwards is the husband of one wife, the father of 5 girls, a surfer, a missionary kid, and when the mood strikes him, a lover of all things bow tie. He has almost 30 years of hospitality experience, and since 2018, he has been the director of wine education for Winebow. And now, here to discuss today's topic, using knowledge wisely, Master Sommelier Ron Edwards.
Good morning, TJ. Good morning, everybody out there in the audience. So nice to be with you once again. Today, we're going to talk about a difficult subject. And as TJ put it in our last episode as to how long will this take, we could probably talk about this over and over again and debate it back and forth and get down into the nitty gritty of moment by moment decision making in the hospitality environment for our use of knowledge. But today we're going to take a top level view. I'm hopefully going to have you think about some things and then apply that to your own life, exactly where you work, where you live. Every subject that I cover on Pre-Shift is near and dear to me because I had to learn it the hard way. In general, as a personality type, I have great value in knowledge and I like to use it. And I like to often prove that I know it, which is not really very helpful in hospitality most of the time because it's not about you in hospitality. So this was a big learning curve for me. I was that, 28-year-old, well-educated sommelier who often used that information improperly. And I'll tell some stories on myself. I'll bring some information from the greater world at large, and including a little bit of a thought from a well-known organizational psychologist who can help us sort of pinpoint the way we're using knowledge sometimes when we are using it improperly. So TJ, you ready for this journey?
I am ready.
All right. Well, here we go. Let's talk about power, because one of the most common realities of knowledge is it is viewed as power, and it is power. It is fuel for things. It is it's the driver for so many activities and so many abilities that we cannot ignore the power of knowledge. The key of knowledge and its power is applying that power in the right place. But, the power of knowledge, it's fuel for guest satisfaction in the hospitality industry. A staff and a manager and a sommelier who doesn't know what they're supposed to know to do their job is going to really struggle to make sure the guest is happy. So knowledge is fuel for guest satisfaction. Another thing that knowledge is really about, and especially when we start talking about beverage programs and the people who build them, whether that's the sommelier or the general manager or whoever's doing that in the restaurant, knowledge is the key to building the right kind of beverage program for your business. We have that long series. Well, I don't remember how many, was it 4 or 5 sessions there, TJ, on building beverage programs that you can look up in the archives. All of that is based, that multiple conversations we had on that subject matter is really related to the idea of how much knowledge it takes to do it the right way, to do it where it's both profitable for your restaurant or your hotel, as well as enjoyable to the person who sits down and tries to order a beverage from your bar or a wine from your wine list, etc. So that knowledge, building that knowledge base and knowing the nooks and crannies of the beverage industry just makes you better and better and better at building the right kind of beverage program. And then the other thing is when we take and apply our knowledge in the right ways, it is a tremendous trust builder. We go to our dentist or our doctor or our nurse practitioner or our architect, or we go to any of these knowledge-based professionals because their knowledge creates trust. It's so elemental in the process that often we don't think about it, but it does. It's reality, right, TJ? Think of which of the professionals that you have to see or choose to see on a regular basis each year are purely made on what you think they know.
What I think they know?
Yeah, you go there because you think they have the knowledge to help you.
Oh, well, yeah, doctors and dentists and auto mechanics and chefs at restaurants and yeah, of course, all kinds of people.
I love the fact you brought up the auto mechanic, right? Because this is a continual search in people's lives who have cars, right? Because you're thinking, well, this idea of I need a trustworthy mechanic. I've heard that so many times. TJ, you've probably said it to yourself. I don't know. Can I trust this mechanic? Does that go through your mind?
Well, because if they tell me, I need a new altimeter and it's going to cost $500, I'll believe them. So I need, yeah, trustworthy is important and to know what they're doing.
Right. Yeah. So it's really important to know that you don't have an altimeter in your car. Nice one. That's very good, TJ.
That was
Nicely done.
a comedian in Boston did that once.
Yeah, and I did some work on my car recently myself, not because I didn't trust the mechanic. I went to the mechanic, he diagnosed the problem, and then I went to a friend's shop who had all the tools and I did the work myself because I have an old car and I didn't really want to invest the extra money. But either way, I need that knowledge base either to tell me what's wrong or to actually tell me what's wrong and go ahead and fix it. And in the case of the hospitality industry, sometimes we don't look from the outside in. The guests don't always look from the outside in. We in the industry know how knowledge driven it is, but from the outside in, they don't necessarily look at our industry as a knowledge based industry, but it most assuredly is. There is so much you have to know and then learn between skill set, technique, and actual informational knowledge to do a great job serving people, that we have to be on our game to know how our knowledge can create trust. And so one of the things we're going to talk about is when we use knowledge wisely, it does create trust. When we don't use it wisely, it doesn't create trust. And that's sort of, this is what happens when we use knowledge improperly. We often use it as a bludgeon, a sledgehammer, something to beat other people over the head with. And we don't always mean this. TJ, you had a great phrase when we were introducing this a couple of weeks ago, saying, "Hey, we were going to get to this topic." And I said bludgeon, you said something else.
Blunt instrument.
A blunt instrument, exactly. And that's a beautiful metaphor of the fact that usually that's a relationship of using knowledge clumsily or with bad motives. Like we're using the knowledge in the correct application perhaps, but it's being used as a leverage point. And so it's really not in the interest of the person we're sharing the knowledge with, it's in our interest instead. And when we do that, we're using it improperly because, yes, you need knowledge to sell. Sometimes sell is about leveraging things around you, but in the end, in the hospitality game, if you made that sale for them and it wasn't really in their best interest, then you used it improperly. No matter how much it may have benefited the business short term, that is a very short term play. And when we use knowledge wisely, it's a long term play. It may mean that we sell a wine that's $10 less a bottle this time, or we sell the cocktail that isn't $18 and we go back to 12 with this guest, because that guest is going to be more pleased and more content with that decision, which means they're going to come back sooner. If they feel manipulated, they're not coming back maybe at all, and they're definitely not coming back as soon as you would like, because all of the hospitality game is in repeat business. The once a year customers, maybe they become your profit margin, but it's the weekly and monthly customers that visit your hotel or your restaurant that keep you open. And those are very important people, and they need to be thought of as such, and of course treated as such. TJ, you got a comment?
Yeah, you just made me. You said the word manipulate, and that made me think of what somebody told me once. I was a sales rep at the time, and I was doing a retail tasting, and a gentleman said that he liked the way I explained the wine. I said, "Oh, thank you." And he had told me that just recently he had been at very well-known steakhouse in Boston, and that whoever was selling him the wine, say who it was specifically, recommended this cab. And when he asked him some questions about it, didn't seem to know much about it. And I think it was $125 or $150. It was fairly expensive at the time. And he got it anyway, but then he felt regret later on, and it was still bugging him a few days later. he felt like he had been manipulated a little bit,
Yeah.
and that's not a good feeling. I don't know if he's ever been back to that particular steakhouse, even though it wasn't the restaurant's fault; it was the particular person. But
Yeah.
you never want to send someone away feeling that they were manipulated.
No, never. We want them to feel like, wow, that was so great. I can't wait to come back. And that's all about not making them feel like that. It's also all about listening. So when we use knowledge clumsily, I think there's a couple of there's three descriptors involved in something that I've been listening to and reading lately. I've really gotten into the thoughts and processes of Adam Grant. He's an organizational psychologist, and he's the author of Think Again, Originals, Give and Take, and Option B. Those are all books that he's published about, how to deal with work life. And then he also has a podcast co-sponsored by TED called Work Life. And one of the topics he deals with in Think Again, as well as in one of the work life subjects, is this idea of how we use knowledge in relationship to other people, and that he kind of grossly divides the world into 4 styles of knowledge use, which obviously has as much inaccuracies as a lot of the personality profiles do, that narrow things into 4 quadrants and stuff like that. But I liked the analogy, at least, or the metaphor. And so the 3 unhealthy ways we use knowledge, he calls the preacher, the prosecutor, and the judge. And so the preacher is, and I'm a little sensitive to this because my father is a minister professionally, but we're going to use this analogy anyway. But the preacher is using the knowledge to sway you to a tightly held belief system instead of being interested in what you might be able to bring to the table. The prosecutor is investing this knowledge share with you in an effort to show you how wrong you are in your current state of knowledge. Both of those start down the path of being a knowledge bully. And it was really great because in his podcast, Adam Grant talks about how he's a professor at Wharton College, and he regularly has students come into his office and ask career advice. And he is completely data research driven kind of psychology scientist guy. And so they'll ask him questions, and then he'll just start spouting off, research programs that he's read that usually counteract this thought that they're talking about. And one awesome student finally looked at him at the end of the conversation and said, you're a knowledge bully. And he laughed and said, what do you mean by a knowledge bully? She said, you have completely shown me that my thoughts are wrong, and I am helpless to defend them, but I don't agree with you. And so we never want to put a guest in that scenario in a restaurant or a hospitality setting of any kind. And the last one of the 3 unhealthy options is the judge. And we think of the judge sitting up on high above the rest of the courtroom, banging the gavel in authoritarian use of knowledge and sort of bludgeoning the audience with their authority. Those 3 applications of knowledge just cannot belong at all in hospitality, yet we often use them. I will tell stories on myself about being one of these people here in just a moment. The 4th and most healthy use of knowledge, which applies to the previous slide we were looking at, is the scientist. And the scientist has knowledge, but the scientist is always asking, what don't I know? I know this, but what don't I know? And if I don't know it, then I need to go find out about it. And when we hold that idea of knowledge, especially if we view it towards hospitality, what does that automatically cause us to do, TJ? If we think we have some knowledge, but we want to find more knowledge, what are we going to do?
Ask questions.
Ask questions. And then when the questions are being answered, we're going to listen.
Yes.
Because oftentimes the prosecutor will ask questions, right? But they're not really listening for the answer. They're asking a question they think they already know the answer to prove you wrong, right? And so the asking of questions isn't the end. The end of the asking of questions is making sure you're listening to the responses so that you can then take your knowledge and apply it to that situation and get more knowledge out of it. That's the scientist's sort of frame of reference. And so when we think about our knowledge in hospitality, we should always ask ourselves, sometimes retrospectively, in what I just said, which of these 4 was I being? And oftentimes we will catch ourselves in one of these 3 unhealthy modes. DJ, you got a comment?
I just remembered a quote from a scientist that said that, a real scientific breakthrough moment is usually not an aha moment. It's a, that's weird.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. How'd that happen? And so, I look back on my own life, and I opened the webinar with this idea of, 28-year-old Ron was not always a very healthy user of knowledge. And this one particular moment, I don't know about everybody else, but in my professional life, there are just these, I don't know, watershed moments, or maybe I was just super self-aware that day, and I walked, and you just walk in and out of that scenario and you never forget it. And in this particular case, I was working at Tapawingo, which is a restaurant that once upon a time existed in northern Michigan, and it was super amazing place, fine dining. People came there to eat well, drink well, and enjoy themselves. And I found myself walking away from a table one day after they had more or less asked for Sauvignon Blanc. Hey, how are you? I'd love to get you something to drink. Have you seen the wine list? Yes, we're interested in a Sauvignon Blanc. Was more or less where we started the conversation. And for some reason, I decided the best thing in the world to do was to point to the section from the Loire Valley, point to the word Sancerre, and give them a 5-minute diatribe on the soil and specificity of why Sancerre is unique. TJ, any problems with that?
It's a little more information than they needed, really.
Yeah, and who really was being served by that information?
Yourself.
Myself. Yeah, I was being the preacher. I wasn't telling them they were wrong to even think about New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, but I was trying to sway them to my tightly held belief that the best Sauvignon Blanc in the world was Sancerre at the time, right? So definitely didn't serve me well. They definitely stopped listening at, I don't know, minute in, and were just begging me to go away from the table without saying so, I'm quite certain. And I just left the table going, why did I think that was the right thing to do? Why? They don't care. Why did I just do that? And it stuck with me, and it still sticks with me as I go to a table. From then on, I tried to be a little more cognizant of what do they really need to hear. I'm not saying I was perfect at it. I still found myself oversharing, for lack of a better description for it, or moving into the preacher mode of trying to move them to my position through a barrage of fun facts that weren't fun for them. They were just fun for me. I was reiterating things that I needed to remember for the Master Sommelier exam. That's what it really boiled down to.
What about, Ron? This is slightly a subsection of knowledge, but I mean, whether we're in restaurants or at retail, we want to try to upsell the customer to generally a more expensive bottle of wine. I mean, there's that goal, but you don't want that to conflict with somebody that clearly doesn't want to be upsold. So how do you satisfy both parties?
Yeah, I think
your managers and your owners and your customers.
That's a great point. I think it is an evolution of the scientist mode, TJ. I think that when you move into question and listen, you will have the opportunities to sell them more than they asked for. And I didn't really realize this, and I'll use Tapawingo again as an example. I didn't really realize this reality until I had left Tapawingo as a full-time employee and came back as a consultant. And I'm standing there in the dining room, remembering all the toys in the toy chest. This was a great wine list, 450-ish choices, and not the world's largest wine list, but really well curated. Even before I got there was so many toys in the toy chest, and then I added my little spice to it, etc. And thinking to myself as I was talking to a table, this table is willing to spend some money. And a year ago when I worked here, I would have talked them down. Again, I was being selfish about the way I was using knowledge instead of embracing where the table wanted to go. And I finally realized I need to listen more and embrace where they want to go. If they're willing to spend the money on one of these truly great wines that are rare in the world, why am I standing in the way? Let's do this. Let's open that bottle of $400, Priorat. And it was a very important thing, but it came out of switching my passion from information broadcast to information collection. Does that make sense, TJ?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so, all of this came out of a passion, right? Those of us who are lifers in hospitality are lifers in hospitality because, well, hopefully, because we're passionate about hospitality. I know some people are stuck in the industry because they feel helpless to do anything else. But the people listening to this broadcast are passionate about hospitality. And that passionate people want to share information about what they're passionate about. It's like, okay, I'm so passionate about wine. I want to share information with you about that. That's great. And we're very passionate about, elevating the knowledge of others around us, right? One of the reasons that TJ loves his job is he gets to do all this research and development on wine, and then he gets to share it with others and maybe elevate their knowledge, even if it's not a direct way, like he's building a digital course. And then he knows that when people take this course, they're going to know more than when they got to the course. Or when he's doing his Bordeaux show, same sort of thing. And I'm very much the same way. I want to broadcast that knowledge, but I've had to learn how to modify my broadcast to make sure the audience was interested in what I had to say. And that's tough to control in that passion. So rein your passion in by using your scientist mode. So be passionate about serving the guest well. Let that passion go crazy, because when you're passionate about serving the guest well, it makes you a better decision maker on the information you use that's at your disposal. Passionate speeches, in quotation marks, speeches, that's a monologue, rarely fall into great service. Passionate conversations, now that will get people back in your building on a regular basis. So that's what it's really about, is taking that passion and moving it out of broadcast and move it into conversation. When we can have conversations with our guests about anything involving their hospitality realm, we're going to do a good job. When we apply it poorly, we get a lot of brokenness. When we passionately try to convince the guest that they should go our way, they really want to drink Chardonnay, and I really want to talk them into Schmaragd Gruner Veltliner. I might even have good logic train, right? Like, yes, I like Chardonnay too, but the dish you ordered, it's just not a Chardonnay dish. And if you order it, you're not going to have the ultimate experience from my point of view. And so I talk you into something that might be a marginal like for you, because I'm so passionate about the pairing. And this one's a tough one. When we use our passion accidentally to correct a guest somehow, boy, that's that judge and prosecutor mode, and it just feels so heavy to the guest. Yes, TJ.
Say it with me now. Chateauneuf du Pape. Seen someone do something like that. They thought that they were helping the customer.
Oh, yeah. And that would be an extreme example, but you don't have to be that direct about it, TJ. It can be so simple. It's like, I don't know, TJ, pick a wine and pronounce it.
Chateauneuf du Pape.
Okay. And I repeat it back to them, and I speak better French than they do. Chateauneuf du Pape. If that's better, I don't know. My French is terrible.
I see what you're saying.
And then they look at you and go, "Oh, that's how it's pronounced."
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that just hurts. It's like a dagger through the heart, right? Because it wasn't intentional, but it doesn't matter. Your passion to pronounce the wine correctly was a dagger in their heart, because let's be real. How hard is wine? How big is this subject matter? How many languages are involved? Why do people always order Pinot Grigio?
Because it's easy to say, easy to understand.
They know how to say it, and they've had it before, and they're too nervous to go beyond their boundaries because wine is really big and really confusing, even to us who work in it all the time.
I met someone who had a theory that one of the reasons behind Malbec's popularity was it was so easy to say.
I think that's part of it. And I think the other part of it is it's juicy and friendly and so likable, right? I mean, we have to remember that us in the geek world, we have a much broader perspective of what's out there in the world to consume, right? TJ and I actually know we could actually go out and buy a bottle of Chiro and experiment with it, or a bottle of Aglianico, or a bottle of this. Most people walking into your wine programs know about 4 grapes, and that's the world of wine to them.
Yeah, Laura's confirming that on her end. People order what they can pronounce.
Exactly. So we got to help them with that, but not the way I just brought it up. And trust me, I have fallen into that trap accidentally over and over again. It takes so much conscious effort. And that's why bin numbers are awesome. Bin numbers are beautiful. You can just repeat back to them and say, oh yeah, bin number 673. And they're like, yep. And you're like, right on. And when you come back to the table, there's enough distance in time between their pronunciation and your pronunciation that it's okay for you to pronounce it the way you normally do. Does that make sense, TJ? Where, okay, so you're ordering wine from me and you said, I'll have that Chateauneuf de Pape. And yep. I say, number 673, great. And then there's 5 minutes go by, you go to the cellar, you get it, you come back, you got glasses on the table and everything else. And then you put it in front of them, you go, Chateauneuf de Pape, 673, Domaine Bosson. And they're like, great, because there's enough distance there that they don't feel corrected.
Yep.
They don't feel like you're showing them up in their pronunciation. All right. The other thing is over-informing, right? And that's that story I told on myself. If somebody just wants to order a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc, and I'm going to try and tell them all the importance and necessary nature of Kimmeridgian soil types and why that makes Sancerre different. No, I just want a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc. Please shut up and go away is what the guest is thinking. So that's that cross between preacher and prosecutor mode, where we're over-informing, hoping to sway them to what we like, or we're over-informing, hoping to show them why they're wrong to order what they were thinking about before they brought us over. It's a power trip, and we have to get out of that power seat. All right. Any comments while we're on this broken plate image?
No, it's a great image though.
All right. Yeah. Because that's what happens inside the guest when we do this badly. Mm-hmm. All right.
I feel like Thoreau would have been a poor sommelier.
You think he would have been a poor sommelier? Why do you think so?
I just think I think he would want to over-educate people. He would overshare his information.
Maybe so. He'd be so desperate for them to absorb wisdom that he wouldn't know how to do it. All right. So let's talk about knowledge applied wisely, right? Behind the scenes, knowledge applied wisely, always apply it behind the scenes for sure, right? That's the nitty gritty details that go into making sure you're ready to do the job when they arrive. You've got all the knowledge you need to sort through the world of wine and curate a beverage program of wine and spirits and beers that matches your concept, that will make your guest comfortable in some ways and challenge them in others. I'm totally good with having options on your wine menu that people don't know. But if your entire wine menu, nobody knows, you better have the best educated sales staff on the planet, because they are uncomfortable from the moment they open the list, and you got to move them from uncomfortable to comfortable in very short conversations. It's a very dangerous game to play this is a really geeky wine list because we don't want you to order anything you know. It's a very dangerous game. I do not actually recommend it, even though I see it happen all the time, and made the mistake of trying to do that occasionally myself. That's why I don't recommend it. I already tried it. The results weren't great. Always apply that knowledge in training your staff behind the scenes. You can only, if you're the sommelier or the general manager or a leader on the floor, you can only reach so many tables. You need everybody on your staff to be on board with the knowledge game and bring them up with you, right? As you increase your knowledge, share with them and increase theirs. That's the place to passionately share your knowledge and perhaps over-inform a little bit. And then measure it out with your guest, right? The amount of information you share when you use it wisely is based on question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, right? So we need to have some ways to get to our tables, to get to our guests in hotels and ask them questions that allow us to decide how much to share next. Very important. I had some kind of like a set of maybe 10 opening lines for tables, depending on the environment I was in and the goal of each table. When you walk up to the table with a goal, the first goal is guest happiness. The second goal is probably something to benefit the dining room. the restaurant. Like I always want to sell a glass of sparkling wine or champagne to every guest that sits down in the dining room, because I think it changes their evening. It makes it special, even though it's Tuesday. So I would have something about that, but then I'm waiting for their response. Did they ignore me? Did they look up and go, oh, that's an interesting idea? Did they say, nope, I'll have a Pinot Grigio? Meaning that I'm not going to move them very far beyond their comfort zone with my process. So I have to adjust from there what I share. It is okay to listen, repeat back to them. That's awesome. We have a great Pinot Grigio. It's right here. If you're interested in trying anything new, this wine right next to it is stylistically similar. You could try it either way, no worries. Which would you prefer, right? Which of the two options would you prefer? Puts it back in their sense of control. You've done your job to try and get them beyond. And if they're truly interested, they'll ask another question and on you go. And then somebody asks you a question about two wines they're deciding between. Now's the opportunity where you get to take all that information that's running around in your head, cull it down to a sentence or two about each wine that you think will make the guest feel more comfortable about one decision or the other. If that involves climate or something detailed like soil type, make it really friendly, but always relate it back to flavor. If you need to share something about Kimmeridgian soil, please don't. But if you need to talk about soil, only talk about it if you can make the guests feel like it changes what they should expect and give them a flavor change. Then you can actually sell them whatever you want. Knowledge is a trampoline mirror situation. You're throwing out knowledge into the guest space so that something will come back to you as a reflection of what they want or bouncing back off the trampoline. And then that allows you to decide, do I share more or do I take what they've given me and move on? Are they asking more questions? Are they avoiding eye contact? That's a really good sign that you are in their space and they don't really want you there right now and you should go away. Is most of the table, except the person talking to you, gone back to their conversations? That now means that you are keeping the host from his or her social moment, and you should be quick and move on. Or is the entire table your captive audience? Wow, that 5% of your dining guests that all of a sudden they're all into it, they're all interested. This is where you get to share all that research you've done in the best possible way. Any feedback or questions, TJ?
Yeah, well, there's a comment from David that's interesting, and it brings up a service question that I would love to hear you answer. So usually order from bin number as a guest to ensure accuracy, but I still see vintage substitution too often. So I don't know if that ever happened to you. Say the wine list says 2010 Bordeaux, and then you go to the bin and it changed to 2011 with the last order, and nobody caught it. Nobody updated the wine list. Or even worse, you don't catch it and the guest does. I mean, what would you do?
These are real things, man. When you're running a real world dining room and wine is coming in and out on a regular basis, and you're running the normal wine program, TJ, and I mean that by you don't have a large cellar, you don't have a backlog of vintages, you don't have a big storage space where you can have a case sitting around. You're doing this just-in-time inventory thing that most restaurants are doing, which means that vintages change without warning, and it normally happens just when you don't want it to, which is when the guest orders that wine. So there's a couple of ways, there's a couple of things. As guests, we need to realize that there are some parts of the world where vintage just isn't that big a deal. TJ, run out on a limb and tell me where a region of the world that if somebody served you a 2017 versus a 2018, you'd like, yeah, whatever.
Well, I'm going to get pilloried for saying anything. So, but a lot of New World regions like Napa Valley are fairly consistent. Yeah. Mendoza.
Fairly consistent. Now, it would matter. You'd have to know something like lately, like the wildfires, right? That's going to change something detrimentally. But unless there's some sort of major cataclysmic event, a great majority of our New World regions are remarkably consistent vintage to vintage. And how about an area of the world, TJ, that you'd be like, wow, that was really unkind for you not to let me know that this was a vintage change?
Well, yeah, I tried to give an example. Bordeaux from 2010 to 2011 was a night and day.
Yeah.
Bordeaux, Burgundy.
Some of the cooler, more tenuous regions of the world, right? So in very serious wine programs where you're actually looking at multiple vintages of things, there's only one answer, and that is your wine list has to be printed in-house, and you have to be maniacal about reprinting pages. That is so hard to do in practice. So when you run into that as a person selling that wine, the first thing is apologize. I'm sorry. Yes, the vintage changed without my knowledge. You just fall on the sword. You don't need to, change without my knowledge. I'm willing to let you open this. If you feel like the wine makes you happy, let's run with it. If you would like me to make another suggestion for a different wine, and I'll be happy to verify the vintage on the list before I bring it out, that sounds great. Take control of the situation, put it in the guest lap of happiness, and move on. Because honestly, if it was the difference between, I don't know, the 2010 Bordeaux versus 2012 Bordeaux, I mean, like, hey, I'll take either. But yeah, definitely there's a big difference between vintages in certain places. And that does make a difference. Just be real as a guest, because this is a really difficult thing to control. Wholesalers tend to be a lot of just-in-time industry. And oftentimes if you're ordering by the bottle, it's the warehouse pickers. They have a bin of open boxes, right? And they're just picking, and they don't always go through the whole vintage before they throw some more on the shelf. And so you might get 10 this week, 11 next week, and then go back to 10 again. I've actually seen that happen in my own programs. TJ?
Yeah, it's tough. And I've actually seen guests ask for, or not ask, actually demand a discount now. Well, that's not the right vintage, so I should get a discount. And that's a tough position to put the server in, or the som.
Right. Well, that's why you have to be proactive in the conversation, and hopefully you don't get into the situation where somebody's already demanding a discount. That you'll have to judge that situation carefully, right? Because offering discounts is not necessarily going to make people happy.
Right.
I'm sorry, this is the vintage we have. I understand that it's different. The price is the same, but I'd be more than happy to find you a different selection if that works better for you. It's sort of the same thing as like, I don't like this wine. Well, drink it anyway because you said you wanted it, and I opened it and you approved it. No, that's not the right way to go. Take it off the table, figure out some way to use it, sell it by the glass, make another table happy with it, teach your staff with it, let them order something else, because one ad in a local newspaper costs more than that one bottle. And you're going to making them keep it will guarantee that 25 people hear how poorly you treated them. And that's a lot of advertising. So anyway, that's the conclusion of this topic.
So yeah, comment on that. Asking for a discount is cynical, but sometimes the prices are not the same, and that's true. Sometimes with Bordeaux, they seem to just go up for a long time, but they have been reflecting supply and demand a little bit more. But yeah, but it's a tricky situation. But I think I agree with you, Ron. You have to maybe sort of go lateral instead of up or down. Just go to a different.
Yeah. I mean, as a som on the floor, I would work really hard not to discount a wine for somebody. Mostly because I know in reality, prices go up and down, yes, at the retail level, but at the wholesale level, those wines between the vintages are within $1 of each other by a bottle. So it's really not applicable when you look at restaurant markups, which are necessary to survive. So we're going to June. I can't believe we've got a June date on.
I was just thinking that. I seem surprised every time we're in a new month, but it's a bi-weekly show, so I shouldn't be that surprised. It's going to happen fairly frequently.
Yeah, the same thing happens to me. I'm like, June 1st, really? Already?
Not officially summer, according to the calendar, but for me, when you see June, that's summer. So you're going to talk about 3 summer reds?
I'm going to bring up 3 summer reds. 3 red options that you can feel strongly about serving in the summertime for the general food that we eat in the summertime, as well as the temperatures, and we'll go from there. And hopefully those will become like features for some of the people out in the audience as they are exploring what to do next. And certainly by the time June rolls around in Richmond, it may not be summer on the calendar, but it's summer in the atmosphere.
And I assume, I've never talked to you about this, but I assume you're like me, somewhat of a seasonal drinker, that you adjust your tastes depending on the weather a little bit.
Oh, a little bit. Actually, my wife and I consume probably 3/4 to maybe more than that white wine year round.
Mm.
Because that's what she likes the most, and I happen to like it a lot. And red wine tends to be maybe a special dinner. White wine tends to fit better with whatever's on the table that night, and we don't have to think about it as much.
Well, June 1st, 2 weeks from today, same time as always, 3 summer reds to get us started for the summer. And we'll be talking about, assume there'll be some sort of food pairing discussion in there at some point.
Probably.
So that's exciting because it's grilling season.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking for, I kind of prefer red wine most of the year. So, and when it's hot, you don't want to, you have to, for me, I feel like I have to adjust a little bit. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to exploring that topic with you.
Well, all right. You will definitely be a part of it, and so will everybody else. And don't forget, everybody, join us every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Next Tuesday at 11 a.m. is the Bordeaux Show, a continuing exploration of the wine and its regions. TJ leads that discussion, and I reverse roles with him. And then, so you can just put it on your calendar, 11 a.m. every Tuesday.
At 11 a.m., join us. And until then, stay safe. Have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you soon.